Productivity Talk with Jay Miller. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by Headspace. Meditation made simple. Visit headspace.com/MacVoices for a free 1-month trial. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, for the last year or so, we've all been living in a time warp, me as much as anybody else. And that means that there are things that I intended to get done and it just never seemed to work out. The schedules never seemed to line up or something. So I'm correcting one of those this time. And I'm happy to welcome for the first time on MacVoices, Jay Miller. Jay, welcome. It's great to see you.
Happy to be here. First time caller, long time listener.
Yeah. Well, we met each other through Mike Potter and MacStock. Virtual MacStock last year. And of course, that didn't happen in person. So, and honestly, somewhere between July and now, I don't know what happened, but we've bounced back and forth a couple times trying to connect. So I'm just delighted to have you here because not only are you a fellow productivity enthusiast, but you're also a fellow podcaster as well.
Yeah. And it's interesting that so much changed between, I guess, the start of planning MacStock and MacStock happening, and then much more changed from that time up till now. So I feel like any conversation we would have had before, I would have had to call you and say, hey, none of that stuff is the same anymore. Let's start over.
Yeah, nothing is the same as it was a year ago. So you do the Productivity in Tech podcast.
Yep. Newly minted the pitch show because people tend to get hung up on that productivity word. They think that you either have to be a productivity enthusiast or someone struggling with productivity, which I figure it's either one or the other and sometimes both, right? But what I've come to realize over, the last 7-8 years of doing this is that ultimately most of us have no idea what we're doing when it comes to productivity, whether it's for ourselves or others, but we tend to learn a lot from other people and figuring out, hey, what worked for them? Maybe I can incorporate some of that into my own workflow and figure things out. So I kind of wanted to step away from the idea of we talk productivity, tell that to my last guest where we literally talk productivity for an hour and a half. But other than that, we tend to just have good conversations about what people are doing, what they're passionate about, and then ultimately how they try to get it all done.
You make such a great point there that I think we're all looking for that. Okay, if I just go to this one website, read this one book, I've got it. My life will fall into place. And I'm like you, the more I talk to more people, the more I kind of take things away from their methodologies and say, hey, that fits in well, or forget it. There's no way I'm ever going to do that. It's just, it's just not going to happen. And so it's almost like one of those recipes that you just have to put together for yourself. You can try to start somewhere with someone's methodology, but sooner or later you're going to have to customize it a bit for yourself.
I'm not from the Northeast, but I feel like it's a lot like making sauce. There's some basics to it, but then at the end of the day, everybody's got their own recipe. And if you tell someone your recipe, they're going to tell you it's wrong and why their recipe is better. So I tend to, and I mean, I'm a rogue out there as well. I use a notebook, pen and paper for my primary productivity system. And I think you can see it in the back of the video here. I've got a wall calendar, for crying out loud. So we tend to keep it pretty old school here, but it's still fun to play around with the tech, and it's still fun to engage and interact with people that are pretty dialed in and have a lot of unique viewpoints to accomplishing things, me trying to avoid, of course, getting things done.
And I think we almost have to encourage people. We have to give them permission to say, it's okay if you want to use the analog wall calendar. It's okay if you want to use a notepad and pen, or it's okay to use a note-taking app in your iPhone. Whatever works for you is the key. I know. I tried for a long time to get away from analog, and yet I found myself coming back to it because there are just certain things. And whether it's my age group, and that was how I was trained long before the digital options came along, or whether it's just me, at the end of the day, I need to use what works.
I think one of the, for me, as someone who got diagnosed with ADHD at a later stage in life, I wound up having to figure out what would work for me. And I learned I've tried all the apps out there, and I dare someone to ask me about an app and ask me if I haven't tried it. I promise you, I probably have, even the ones that come out on a daily basis. And at the end of the day, I just want to sit there and play with them. And while that's great, and it's a great fidgeting toy, and it's a great thing to do when I need to have a reliable, source, or I guess that one trusted source, as they would call it, I always go back to my notebook. And people always want to tell you what you can't do with a notebook, and oh, you can't search through it. Oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. That's actually kind of the point. I like less in many cases. And in this case, less is more when it comes to just knowing what I need to handle that day, not thinking about anything else other than those things and just doing it.
Wow, that's interesting. And I think you just made one of the points that why I was pushing so hard for digital is I wanted that searchability. I wanted that I don't have to stack up notebooks from the last 5 years in the that I'm never going to look at, but I might need. Just it's one of those things. I don't want to throw it away because sometime I might need it. But at the end of the day, there are certain things. I guess I've found that there's a balance that I have to give up certain things to get certain things, and what I get is a lot more comfort, and I feel a lot more thoroughness, but I'm giving up that searchability. So it's a balance for me.
Yeah. And to be honest, I mean, there's a lot of searchability, recallability, whatever you want to call it, in the existing tools. And I know that this is like the big productivity sin of just leave it in email. I trust Google, and Gmail better than I trust my own productivity system, because I've had to look for tax returns from 5 years ago. I've had to look for, those software licenses that I thought I saved in 1Password and apparently didn't. But for some reason, if I just go and search through, in all mail and then the name of the license, I actually had to do this 2 days ago when one of my, I thought, trials, which I had already bought, ran out. I just typed in, hey, context, license, boom, there it popped up. And I was like, all right, cool. Didn't need to set a reminder to make sure I activate that license. I just let it run out. And when it ran out, I dug for the license for a good 5 seconds, and then I was done.
This is going to be a fun conversation. I mean, so much of that, because I think that's another thing that we all get so hung up on is I want to be able to type in license. Let's say license, I don't know, launch bar, and have it, find it right away, and that's it. I'm done.
I have one of those.
I'm good. and instead, it may not be as important. It may be more important to just be able to get close, type in license. Okay, so I may have to scroll through 20, 30, maybe 40 emails, but it's there, and I didn't have to take the time to categorize it.
Yeah. And that just saves you time. And I've learned the more stringent your system is, the second you need to break away from it, it is the hardest thing to do. That one time where that one thing just doesn't fit, you go into an existential crisis, and now you're like, I have to rebuild the whole thing. 20 years of my life. I need to start over and just figure it out from day one. And I mean, that is where people really start to stumble with these applications, is it has to be the all-encompassing solution, or it has to solve every problem exactly how we want. And if it doesn't, we're either going to try to automate our way into it, or we're going to try to replace it with a better tool. And what we tend to see is just people wind up switching from tool to tool to tool to tool to tool. And that's why I stopped talking about, hey, we're going to do a deep dive into Todoist or OmniFocus or whatever, because by the end of the day, that person might be like, oh, I figured out a problem. Now I'm switching over to things, or I'm switching over to this other application. It's like, well, you just told everybody that this was the best way to do it. I've got people that are now going to try it, and then, they're going to go to you for help. And when you tell them, sorry, I can't help you, now they're mad at both of us.
So let me ask you something on that score. And I want to come back to the deep dives in a minute, but so you're saying it's okay to switch gears in the middle of the process, it's okay to change boats in the middle of the river. If you decide that program A or procedure A is going to be better than what you've been using, that you don't, because the comment you made that really struck me though is I have to go back and rebuild my life, because I've gotten caught in that trap a couple of times too, where okay, I'm switching over to this new system, so now I got to go back and redo everything I've been saving all along to fit into this new system, and that is counterproductive to say the least.
Yeah, I think the trick with that is if you do feel like something is just not working, to me it's easier to kind of uproot that process and insert a new process if it's focused. And I had this conversation with Scotty Jackson, and another person you should really have on the show. Really great guy. And we were talking about it almost in terms of like think of having a washing machine, a dryer, and a microwave. Now you can probably buy a washer and dryer combo. But what happens if one of those tools break? Now you've got to replace both your washing machine and your dryer. If you have just a washing machine that washes, clothes, and you have just a dryer that just dries clothes, if one of those breaks, you can still do the other thing. And now you may want to like air dry your clothes, or if you have an old washboard, I feel really bad for you, but I mean, you can get it done. But where does the microwave come in? And that's where there's a huge problem with a lot of tools like this, because sometimes you have tools that want to be the washer and the dryer and then throw in the microwave as well. And you're just like, well, I don't need this. Like this whole part of my system just becomes a problem. And I need to avoid that like the plague.
And this is one of my favorite topics that so many programs we use, some I slander on a regular basis, and some that I just ignore on a regular basis. They all keep adding features and complexity. They want to be that washer, dryer, microwave kind of thing. And I tend to shy away. It's like I'm not going to tell you I use all one-trick ponies, because that would be absolutely untrue. But the complexity that comes with all that additional power, I mean, it's great that it's there for the people that need it, want it, and know how to use it. But I'm afraid that so many developers are chasing that complexity or that all-in-one to be the solution for everyone, as opposed to maybe coming up with 2 or even 3 different applications that mesh together, that will interact with each other and interact with the system better than just trying to be one thing. Do you think I'm off base on that?
Not at all. I mean, I think of one of the apps that I can't break away from for some reason is Fantastical, even though I have my wall calendar. And honestly, the wall calendar is more accurate than Fantastical. But Fantastical does one thing that my wall calendar doesn't. It gives me a link to the Zoom, room that I'm going to be in. In my job, I probably have on average about 3 meetings a day. And it's my responsibility to be there at the right time, be in the right room at the right time. So when I can just open Fantastical, go to the event and hit join, like that's great. And there are tools that do just that. But at the same time, I might need to add a calendar event. I might need to decline an event. And I can do all of those things within Fantastical. And it added like that one feature that is tied to what I'm doing. And it does it so well. And it does it better than anything else. But then when you think of the company FlexBits, they also have CardHop, which is a contact manager. It would almost make sense to say, hey, we could combine the two and make Fantastahop or something like that. And it's your contact manager, and when you need to schedule a meeting with someone, you literally click a button and the meeting's scheduled. Everything's in one place and everybody's happy. But I also look at it from the perspective of I now have probably the best contact manager out there, and I also have the best calendar app out there, and they're made by the same company. And the fact that they're trying to just focus on doing that one thing and doing it really well is a benefit versus having to make sacrifices to fit everything into one client.
You just did it. Do you know what you just did?
Did I convince you to buy that Fantastical license so you can hit the join button?
No, try it. You want to try again?
Oh no.
So I'm going to correct you and see if you agree that you should be corrected. But you said the best contact manager, the best calendar app out there, the best calendar app for you, the best calendar contact manager
you got
for
me.
you. Yeah. So, and I do it too. I do because I'm sitting here saying, oh, I'm going to argue with him over that one. And then it's like, no, it's not. It doesn't matter because what's right for me is right for me. But both our choices would be absolutely great options. It's just you have to find the one that's right for you.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I stopped talking about productivity on my own shows and I just come on other people's shows and gab all I want about it.
This edition of Mac Voices is supported by Headspace. Headspace is meditation made simple. If you haven't tried meditation as a way to help you get through some of the difficulties in your life, or if you have and thought it wasn't for you, then I'm betting you haven't tried Headspace. Headspace is a daily dose of mindfulness in the form of guided meditation in an easy-to-use app. That app is the key because it will guide you through the process of not only selecting your goal, but also choosing your meditation and actually performing that meditation. The goal is up to you. Better sleep, more focus, less stress, whatever you need to achieve. Headspace then suggests some meditations from their extensive library and then tells you how to perform them. I love that process because I am in control of all aspects of it. I'm not told what to do, I am given choices. If I want to change in midstream, that's my choice. If I decide that this meditation isn't to my liking, I can try another. And if I'm getting what I want from Headspace, there is no reason to look elsewhere and no reason to stop. You can try that same experience for yourself. You deserve to feel happier, and Headspace is meditation made simple. Go to headspace.com/MacVoices. That's headspace.com/MacVoices for a free 1-month trial with access to Headspace's full library of meditations for every situation. That's the best deal offered right now, so head to headspace.com/MacVoices today. Thanks to Headspace for their support of Mac Voices. Now, wait a minute. How do you stop talking about productivity on a productivity podcast?
I mean, that's probably the most productive thing that you can do is stop talking about stuff and actually start doing things.
Ooh, I think we need that was a t-shirt on that. So, yeah, and thank you, because you brought me back to the deep dives thing that you said you stopped doing that. And I'm not sure that I would want you to stop doing that if it's something that you are familiar with and works for you. I would love to hear about why Program X in this fantastic calendar example, but some of the other ones you mentioned earlier. Yeah, why did you adopt this? What was your thinking? Because maybe I can say, yeah, that goes kind of parallel with me, or I can just reject it out of hand and say, Jay has completely different needs than I do.
I think that there's, I don't want to say that there's a time and a place for everything, but I think that that's ultimately, I wanted the pitch show to be about the people and about what they were doing. One of the things that, I'm lucky enough to be in a job that didn't exist when I was growing up. Like no one came to our, career day and say, you can be a developer advocate. You can travel all over the world once traveling's a thing again. And you can give talks to thousands of people that all want to hear you talk about product X. And in a way, that's actually that's my job, is to do deep dives. It's just to do a deep dive for a particular company. Now, I could easily do something similar for other applications. I've worked with companies and said hey, let's learn about this from the inside out and let's tell people why it's one of the best tools ever. But let's do it on your channel. I'm more than happy to do a deep dive for, Keyboard Maestro and say, hey, Mac Sparky, you do the field guides. Hey, here's some stuff that I saw. Maybe you'll like this. Or maybe I can do it on my blog and say, this is why I like this tool. But when it comes to the podcast, I wanted the podcast to have a very specific goal. And that is to have real conversations with real people doing real things in hopes that other people out there could learn from those things and apply them to whatever it is they're doing in their life. And I learned that it became harder to do that when on day one, you're talking about product X. On day two, you're talking about product Y. On day three, you're talking about product Z. And then from there, you're just like, well, which one is important? And you say, well, all of them. Well, you just gave me 3 hours of content that I have to now try to cram into my life. Can I just talk to the photographer guy about what it means to be a photographer in the age of COVID?
Okay. I think we have similar focuses, I guess, if you will, because MacVoices has always been about the people, at least as much, if not more, than about the product. I mean, yeah, I want to know about the product, but I'm always intrigued by the people that build these things. So often we find out that they got their start because they had an itch of their own they wanted to scratch, and then found out other people had the same itch. And I think that's fascinating. But then what it takes to continue to develop, maintain it, develop it, market it, enhance it, I think it takes something special. I mean, I know very few people who approach development as just a job. It's more of a passion. It's more of a calling. It's more of just an expression almost of their personality than, okay, I'm going to sit down and code from 9 to 5 today.
I agree and disagree. I think that in some ways it can very much be a job. I would admit, since I've started actually working for a tech company, I do much less programming on my own things. But part of that is I actually get to build awesome things and present them now, and I get paid to do it. So in many ways, my focuses have changed, but I would definitely think that some of the projects that I have now that I'm passionate about, I wouldn't be doing had it not been for it just being my job to do. And again, I will admit I'm in a very unique position. There are not many developer advocates, out there. Every developer advocate role is different. Some are more marketing based, some are more sales based, some are more engineering based. I'm kind of in that comfy position between marketing and engineering where it's like, hey, build stuff and talk about it. Don't worry too much about the sales side. We'll take care of that for you. So it's cool that I get to say, my only restriction is I have to use these tools, but I can build whatever I want. But at the end of the day, I get to, close the laptop and not think about it until the next day. And now, do I do that? No. But I do have colleagues that do that very well, where they say, hey, I'm done. I'm going to go rock climbing, or I'm going to go, one of my colleagues is a drag racer. And I was like, I don't want to be thinking about code when I'm going 200 plus miles an hour. That just sounds like a bad idea.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty safe assumption. So you're alluding there to what a developer advocate does. And I wanted to get into a little more of that because that's a new term. A lot of us are familiar with evangelists, but that seems to be a little more of a marketing, promotional kind of thing. And my guess with as a developer advocate, you would be, not to be smart about it, but you'd be developing and advocating for what it is you're developing. Is it really that simple? And then, who do you advocate to? How do you advocate? Where do you advocate?
Yes, that's kind of the answer there.
Okay, next question.
Yeah, developer evangelism. You still see the phrase every now and then, but I think there was a kind of a falling out around the term evangelism in the tech space. There's an issue that members of the community take when you are there to proselytize why your application of choice is the best, which is very different from the productivity space. So that's a very interesting parallel that I just noticed. But as an advocate, I'm advocating as kind of in some ways a representative of the company to its community. So my primary job is to get the feedback from the community and help them in whatever ways make sense. If someone's looking to set up a contract with our company, then I need to direct them to our sales team. If someone says, I just don't understand why this code isn't working, it's my responsibility to play, the tier 1 support that we talked about of like, well, hey, let's look at this a little bit. And if I can see something, quickly, I'm more than happy to help. But if not, let me get you in touch with our support team. I'm there to give demos. I'm there to present. So, my current project that I'm working on now is a diversity search app. I work for a search company. We not any of the ones that you probably know of, but also one of the largest ones in the world, which is kind of an interesting concept. We build site searches more, and then we can also allow you to search your network and infrastructure and all those other things. And you can even use it for searching for security threats. Again, kind of corporate stuff that happens in the background that most people don't see happening. But a part of that means that I get to showcase some of the use cases. Like, one of my latest talks was about how I used our tool to analyze and search through 8 million police call records from San Diego Police Department and look for, incidents of like high impact areas that might have a lot of, crime in a specific, area. It can help real estate agents. It can help people looking for new homes. It can help look for what areas need more or less support in terms of funding. And all I had to do was say, hey, this is interesting to me. I want to look at it. I want to build it. And I think that there are people out there that would be interested in this as well. And I get to showcase a few of our products. And sure enough, after giving that talk, you have people that want to talk about the whole gamut of stuff, whether it's talking about policing or whether it's talking about data science or whether it's talking about our tooling in general. And my job is to say, yes, let's have these conversations and do it in a way that I can be myself and I can represent myself and my personal beliefs, but I can also represent the company and know how to kind of divide that line. And I think that's the important part, where in evangelism, you're always talking about the company. But as an advocate, you feel like you can be a representative of the community for the community, but you can also be a representative of the company for the company. And the company understands that. That was one of the coolest things. My boss was like, you need to do podcasts. Like, don't worry about it. Like, if you want to talk productivity, talk productivity. If you want to talk, technology or talk about our tooling, talk about that. But it's important for us that you're in the community, you're engaged, and that you're making those connections, because we can't do it.
We can't do it. Why?
As a company. Like the company isn't going to say, hey, Chuck, we want to send someone down to tell you all about, our tooling on the podcast, because they don't listen to the show. They don't know what the content's about. They can't go to all the different podcasts out there. But what they can say is, hey, Jay, you're a member of the productivity community. You talk to all these people. Do that. We encourage you to do that. I mean, we're not going to pay you extra for doing it, but you get to do that. And it's now a part of your job to go out there and show that, like, the people that work on these tools are just ordinary people and they have their own passions. Like, again, driving a car at really fast speeds, which I want to do one day when traveling is a thing again.
Hopefully not on the highway you were referring to.
I mean, I've been on the Autobahn a few times.
Okay. Note to self, don't ride with Jay. So again, you bring up a really interesting point. Is evangelism gone, or is evangelism a bad thing? Because there is definitely a lot more conversation in the tech space right now about community and about a lot of different social issues. And, pick one. It doesn't really matter which one. The point is that these are conversations we're seeing more and more. We're seeing Apple, and of course, this is an Apple show, Apple-oriented show, so we look there. But there are a lot of different companies that are doing the very same thing. They are getting involved in the social space a whole lot more. And I'm just massively intrigued by that. It's obviously good business, but how and why and when did this shift occur? Because it just seems to be so prevalent now.
I think it was kind of a rolling change. One of the things that we saw recently was Microsoft took this massive approach and this kind of, and I know it's the Apple show, and I just said, like, it's like I called the name of Beelzebub, but
yeah, I would blank that out later. Yeah.
Okay. Well, expletive, has really worked really hard to get the community involved and almost in a way that I wouldn't say is dangerous, because maybe one day they'll be like, "Hey Jay, we want to talk with you," and I'll lose access to all my cloud stuff. But in a way that's really interesting, that they've said, we want to support the community. I mean, there are programming languages where the creators of them work for Microsoft now, and what do they do all day? They get to work on their language. They get paid a lot of money to just continue doing what they were doing for free, but now it gets to be their focus and it gets to be their livelihood. And what they did was they made the statement of, we want to support the community, and they started actually hiring people to do that. A longtime voice in the Apple space, Christina Warren, now works for Microsoft as an advocate. It is her job to go and stand up at Ignite and talk and do all those great things. And we don't have to give up our Apple products. Well, I don't work for Microsoft, so I didn't have to anyway. But she didn't have to give up her Apple products, and I'll let her, come on the show and talk about being an advocate for them. But it's interesting that once companies realized evangelism made it all about them, advocating made it all about the people that use their products, the people that are around in their communities, and the people that they hopefully want to become future, users of their products. And when you set folks aside to say, hey, serve those people, reach them in however you normally would, we're going to give you the time and we're going to give you the space to do that. I think it only made sense, because what you were doing before was saying, as an evangelist, here are the things that we want you to talk about. Here are the places that we want you to go and talk about them. And what would happen is you would go to conferences. The first thing you would say is, hi, I'm Jay Miller. I'm a developer evangelist for insert company here. And then people would get up and walk out, because they're like, well, I don't use product here. I'm not interested. And so this isn't for me anymore. As an advocate, we still kind of get some of that hostility of like, okay, you're here to just talk about your product. But I feel like the shift is slowly moving towards, we're here to have a great conversation. Will it involve our product at some point in time? Yes. But ultimately, let's have a good conversation, and let's make sure that that, us as individuals and the company that supports us wants to support you, whether you're using our product yet or not.
Jay Miller will be back in the next edition of MacVoices to talk about his career as a developer advocate, a podcaster, have more discussions surrounding productivity topics, and our respective podcast audiences. That's next time on MacVoices. I hope you'll join us. Until then, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.